Richician!
Hey YouTube, Richician84 here, and we're at the penultimate stage of the top hated card series that I'm doing. This time I'm counting down my top 10 hated spells in the game. Yes, these are spells that I hate so much that I wish they never existed. Now again, I don't mean any offence to anyone who plays them, I'm just simply explaining why I hate them so much that I wish none of these spells existed at all. Even if there are counters to them, that doesn't mean you're always going to see them. Of course, with that being said, let's begin. Okay, so in at number 10 is Nobleman of Crossout, a card that I've hated since the very beginning, just destroying and banishing face-down monsters just like that. It's one of the cheapest cheap shot banish cards in the game, just breaking defences too easily and just banishing something that I need. I'm sure it doesn't see play in current Yu-Gi-Oh anymore, but back in the day, and even in GOAT format games, it's so fucking annoying. I hate it. Like, especially when I'm playing like Exodia or Dark Magician, and it banishes like Sangan, Emissary, or if I'm playing Dark Magician, it banishes like my Apprentice Magicians or any of my flip effect monsters before I can use them. Like, Old Vindictive Magician, Magician of Faith, Gravekeeper's Spy. I hate it. In fact, there was a time, like during the mid to late 2000s, that I was even main decking Desert Sunlight just to specifically counter this card. And Zaborg the Thunder Monarch, but mainly Desert Sunlight, so that Nobleman fizzles out and I still get my effect. Or I just save my monster from being banished just outright. But yeah, like I said, although I love GOAT format duels, this is one of the only things I hate about it. That this just sees lots of play, and it's just giving me horrible flashbacks from back in the day. Just cheaply getting rid of monsters just like that and leaving me defenseless. It's such bullshit. Number 9, Wave Motion Cannon. A very cheap, easy win card. Doesn't see much play nowadays though, except in Sacred Beast decks. I mean, it kind of makes sense, like whether it's to use for its own effect or tribute fodder for Hamon, Lord of Striking Thunder. But otherwise, it's a generic burn card, and I despise generic burn cards. They're so fucking cheap and annoying. Wave Motion Cannon is no different, and it was near impossible to get rid of back in the day because there was hardly any back row removal. And not only that, it was also used as a way to get a cheap, easy win through end of match procedure. In fact, I remember one time during a Pharaoh's Tour qualifier where it went to a third game and went to the 4-turn rule, and my opponent played Swords of Revealing Light and Wave Motion Cannon, and rather annoyingly I didn't draw any back row removal, so I just had to scoop because the cannon was fired off on turn 3 and I had no way to get my life points higher. So annoying and so fucking cheap. I mean, that's really all there is to it. I'm just thankful that it hardly ever sees play anymore. Number 8, Book of Life. Now, this might seem a bit random, but yeah, I hate Book of Life because it's another cheap shot banish card. Zombie players just bringing back whatever zombie they want and messing up my graveyard in the process, including banishing one of my best monsters. And it happened to Dark Magician a couple of times, which was just horrible. Yeah, it's just cheap and dirty and gives the card holder too much advantage in several ways. I mean, that's really all there is to say about it. I mean, now, even though I've played zombie decks as well, but only vampires and my Deadeye's deck, a deck based on Red Eye Zombie Dragon, I didn't want to play this card, for the reasons that I just described, because it's so fucking cheap and annoying. Yeah, it's a zombie staple, but I don't give a shit. I refuse to use it. Besides, there are other ways I can bring zombies back from the graveyard, like Mizuki, even generic stuff like Monster Reborn and Call of the Haunted. I'd much rather use those. Yeah, that's really all there is to say. Number 7, Mischief of the Time Goddess. Another one which seems random, but yeah, I hate this card a lot. This, along with Yaoi, are basically the only anime-only cards that I never, ever wanted to see get printed as a real card. Mainly Mischief of the Time Goddess, due to the fact that it skips an opponent's turn, and yet it became a real card, and I was just distraught. Such a bullshit card. In fact, this is the source of my hatred for Valkyries. It's basically an OTK deck because of this card. I mean, yes, it can brick, but not always. When they go off, they're just near impossible to stop. I mean, the goddesses themselves are a bit annoying, but not anywhere near as annoying as Mischief of the Time Goddess. Why did it have to be made into a real card? Cards that skip turns are just unfair and unbalanced. I mean, sure, it's not generic, thankfully, and it only works in a Valkyrie deck, but it doesn't matter. It makes the deck so fucking annoying, and I hate it. I just don't enjoy playing against them. I mean, yes, I usually do win against them, but just this card by itself just doesn't make them any fun to play against, and I usually end up hoping the opponent bricks. Yeah, that's really all there is to say about it. Number 6, Invocation. Now, as it was implied during my top 10 hated fusion video, I hate invokes. Mainly because Mechaba exists, but I also hate Invocation, purely because it's another cheap shot banish card. because it can banish fusion materials from my graveyard as well as the card holders, which just makes it so cheap and unfair. Like, how dare you banish cards from my graveyard for your fusion purposes? Like it's no better than Book of Life. It's so annoying. So yeah, it's a cheap shot banish card. Like, now, you probably won't agree with me on this, and it might be an unpopular opinion, but I think this is worse than Super Poly due to the fact that it banishes materials from my graveyard. I mean, yes, Super Poly is more generic, and sure, you can't chain anything in response to its activation, but at least they still go to the grave, and I can get that monster back or just do something else with it. But Invocation just outright banishes it, just like that, for the opponent's fusion purposes. It just pisses me off, man. Number 5, Hidden Temple of Necro Valley. Yeah, I don't like Gravekeepers, and this is one of the reasons why, because it shuts down special summons except Gravekeeper monsters. I mean, sure, Necro Valley has to be on the field, but yeah, it's the main card of the deck. It's always on the field. This is just insult to injury. Like, I don't like being locked out of special summons, which is basically what most decks are about nowadays. Special summoning. I mean, you could argue it's a necessary evil against a lot of overpowered decks, but to me it's just pure evil, and I basically can't play with this card out. But thankfully, it does have the weakness where it only stays on the field if Necro Valley is on the field. So like, all I gotta do is take up Necro Valley and this card goes with it. Yeah, I mean, Gravekeepers were already annoying enough as it is before this card came along. I just despise it. Gravekeepers just stop too many things. Number 4, Necro Valley. Yeah, you pretty much guessed this was going to be on here, considering I was just ranting about Gravekeepers. But yeah, obviously, as I've said in a deck profile, Spy, Guard and Curse are the only Gravekeeper cards in the archetype that I like, because they've been so helpful to me outside of the deck. But other than that, I fucking hate Gravekeepers, mainly because this card exists and just makes it difficult to play against them. It just outright locks down my graveyard, just like that. Obviously not in the same way as Macrocosmos and Dimensional Fissure, but it might as well, since I'm just completely cut off from it. And I hate how it keeps being errated. As before, it only made it so that cards in the graveyard can't be banished or targeted. But I could still use things like Treeborn Frog and stuff, but now they just changed it so that cards in the graveyard can't be moved to another place. And that last line of text is a change that I didn't even know about until now, which is negate any card that changes types or attributes. So it counters zombie world and solidarity randomly. But I don't think that's hardly ever gonna come up. Well, except in the zombie horde matchup, I guess. But yeah, I just hate the third effect where it negates an effect that moves cards from the graveyard to a different place. And to an extent stops cards in the graveyard being banished. So, like, the card by itself is something that elemental hero based decks just outright auto lose to, because I can't activate Miracle Fusion unless both the materials are on the field, and then the Neos, if I'm using Rainbow Neos or Neospatians, I can't banish Neos Fusion for protection. But then again, it shouldn't be a problem for Rainbow Neos, because like I have been able to beat Gravekeepers with my Rainbow Neos deck in the past. In fact, it's the only hero deck that can actually deal with Gravekeepers, like, no problem. Every other hero deck just outright struggles. It's just such bullshit. Like, there was even one time where I played against Gravekeepers with my Elemental Hero deck and top-decked Miracle Fusion, and I couldn't even play it, so I had to scoop, and I was like, see, this would have been great in literally any other situation. Well, unless there was a card on the field that stopped spells and special summons altogether. But, yeah, Gravekeepers are just infuriating because this card exists. I just wish the card didn't exist, but then again, Gravekeepers can't really play without it. I guess the appropriate thing for me to say was just, I wish Gravekeepers as a whole just didn't exist. Just so annoying, bullshit and unfair. I was gonna say something else about them, but it just slipped my mind. Number 3, Magician's Right Hand, like a degenerate floodgate, basically. I mean, sure, it can only be played in Spellcaster decks, but it doesn't matter. I still hate this fucker, because it's something that spell-heavy decks just auto-lose to. Yeah, it's another reason why I hate Pendulum Magicians and Endymion. Like, both decks are annoying enough to deal with as it is, but this is just insult to injury, just playing in something else that negates something. And as I said before, I hate cards that shut down spells. And this card is no different, even if it has to negate the first spell effect. And apparently it can even stop Super Poly somehow. And I was like, how? Nothing can negate Super Poly. But apparently, while it can't negate the initial activation, it can still apparently negate the effect of it. I think someone can probably explain it better than I can. Like, I'm pretty sure Weber's 5 can. I hate that so much. It's just too much. I'm pretty sure hand decks can play it as well alongside. There can only be one, since there are spellcaster monsters in the deck. Like Summon a Monk, Magic Hand. Yeah, fuck floodgates of any kind. That's all I can say. Number 2, Dimensional Fissure. One of my most hated spells of all time. A card that made my life a misery back when macro decks were a thing. Didn't bother me too much, well, when they were seeing play, as my Dark Richician deck could still play under Fissure and macro, but not so much when I started playing Richician, and like that deck would just auto lose some macro. Same with Rainbow Neos and Elemental Hero as well, to an extent. But I think my Elemental Hero deck could still deal with it a bit better than Richician and Rainbow Neos could. I don't like being denied a graveyard. As I said earlier, I like having a graveyard. I want to be able to use my graveyard so I can, play the fucking game. But I just couldn't with Fissure and macro out, which is why when both those cards got limited, I was jumping for joy. They were two of the few changes on the September 13 list that I actually liked. But rather annoyingly, they still see play every now and then, even in Ritual Beasts. That was just infuriating. Sometimes it would be side-decked as well, in a few side decks, but at least it's kind of easier to deal with now that this card and macro are limited. It's just one of the cheapest cheap shot banish cards in the game. I hate it a lot. I don't like my stuff getting banished, unless I'm playing something like Miracle Fusion or Dragon's Mirror. Excuse me. Yeah, fingers crossed and touch wood that this fucker and macro just stays limited, forever. Full power macro was just too much. Number 1, my most hated spell in the game is of course Mystic Mine. Now, I did already talk about this because it is my second most hated card in the game, since it was on my top 10 hated card list, so again, there's nothing I can really say about it that I haven't said already. But yeah, it's the most degenerate field spell in the game. I'd rather be stuck behind Necro Valley than Mystic Mine any day, because at least with Necro Valley I can still kind of play, but Mystic Mine just outright stops me from being able to play at all, unless I can see some back row removal, but again, there's no guarantee I'll see it. Like I said, it's a card that only exists just to piss everyone off, whether it's being played in troll decks like Mystic Mine Burn, or it's being used to stall out games and win through end of match procedure, which, like I said before, is a cheap, dirty, dishonourable and disrespectful way to win a duel, and its drawbacks mean nothing because they're never going to come into play. Because getting the same number of monsters as the opponent is easier said than done, especially if they don't have any monsters, and your Mystic Mine players are not stupid. They're not going to extend their board of monsters while Mystic Mine is on the field. otherwise it will backfire. And I just hate that it can even stop monsters that are unaffected by card effects, all because of a technicality in the wording. It's just horseshit. And I've been robbed of victory too many times because of this card, like inside and outside of tournament play. As I said before, it's something that just makes tournaments off-putting to me, as it's just seeing play and being used to get a cheap, easy win for end of match procedure. I mean, I know not everyone does it, but there's always someone that will do it. Limiting terraforming and metaverse did nothing to slow this card down. I hope one day this fucking card just gets outright banned, because it's degenerate as fuck. You're not always going to see an out to it, and like I said, its drawbacks mean nothing, because they're never going to be applied. Or if they do, then, well, that's pure luck. But again, there's nothing I can say about it that I haven't said already. But yeah, that's it for my top 10 hated spells. I mean, if you agree, great. If you don't, fair enough. Like, that's your opinion. But, let's just agree to disagree and move on with our lives. Anyway, that's the end of the video. Thanks for watching. Stay safe, and I'll catch you guys later. See ya. Thank you very much for watching. Be sure to subscribe to the Richician YouTube channel.